Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone around the world. Welcome to our webinar interview with Dr. Chris Misling, CEO of Anavex Life Science. I'm Echo Hindoya, and the CEO at MSQ Ventures, a New York-based cross-border advisory firm specialized in life science. During the next hour, we will have the opportunity to hear from Chris about his journey with Anavex and his perspective on the future of the biopharmaceutical industry. We will discuss Anavex's innovative pipeline, the challenges of developing treatment for the neurological disorders, and the importance of partnership and collaborations in the industry. We are pleased to co-host this webinar with Bio Around the World, a platform that aims to streamline cross-border collaboration on global drug development by sharing real-life practical experience to achieve greater harmonization. Chris has served as the CEO of Anavex Life Sciences since 2008. Under his leadership, Anavex has developed a pipeline of potential first-in-class therapeutics that target the sigma-1 receptors, a protein target that is implicated in various diseases. Before joining Anavex, Chris held several senior leadership positions in the biotech companies as well as financial institutions. Let's welcome Chris to our webinar interview. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Chris, do you mind just share some of your background? I just give a high level, but I know I can take one day to give all the details. Maybe you can have the quick highlights.
Absolutely. My background is in big pharmaceutical companies. Then I went to small biotech companies. Anavex is the one I was right now, the longest. And I have a PhD in chemistry and an MBA from Kellogg Northwestern University.
So I know you also worked as an investment banker when you started your career. So why you choose to be investment banker with your PhD background, and then you switch to be the executives at the biotech company?
It is very productive to be in a service-oriented business like investment banking, where you see a lot of technologies, a lot of products, and you can basically choose and look at in what direction the industry goes. And that was exactly what I did. I was part of this transition, for example, from oncology, precision medicine, to develop targeted therapeutics. And I saw the opportunity when I met the team from Anavex, the scientists, that this could be achieved also in central nervous system. And that's led to me to join Anavex.
That's a wonderful journey. So you had experience to look at all like different sectors or in the life science and the biotech companies, but you choose the very well-known challenging one, the CNS sector. Why?
Because I thought this is really what we should aim for, striving for what is really still an unmet need and not going after Me Too products.
So when you joined the Anavex, that was very early stage, right? And now you already have several, like a clinical trial in the later stage. So how did you make the progress in such a short time?
Yeah, that's an evolution. In the time before I started, there was a big lab where there were many people working in laboratories and developing and finding these drugs, which we now have developed into the clinic. And it takes time and a lot of work and effort and also a bit of luck. And we were able to accomplish this. And we're now in the late stages of clinical trial, actually ready for commercialization in some cases or very close to commercialization. And I'm very proud about this, especially that the team has accomplished this as a team effort altogether.
So if you can highlight or think back this journey, what's the three most important things you did to make this a successful journey?
I think the three most important things is to know the right people, to deal with investors who are supporting us and supporting the company and the philosophy and the strategy of the company. So that was a very important accomplishment. And secondly, bringing in the right people to move forward this exciting asset where we have able to accomplish this so far. And the third, I would say, is really like also a bit of luck. You need also have a compound which is really showing resilience and really changing in the changes of life of patients, which we have now demonstrated in several placebo-controlled studies. So I think these are the three ingredients I would highlight.
Actually, you have been put two important things that are all about the people, like external and also internal. So could you please provide more insight? How did you find the right people? I think that is very challenging. Like the people, the talents are variable, but actually to pick up the right people for the right position, it's kind of like it sounds like a 101 for the CEOs, but actually it can be a challenge for the long term too.
I remember that when I was in banking, the advantage again was that you meet a lot of companies and hence also many people behind the companies. And that's really like about networking. So develop the network and then also culture the network. So support it and keep this dialogue and in contact with the people you met before. I think that's really the way to go. And that from there, you find the people you need for the respective job.
Thank you for sharing that part. So developing the treatment for the CNA sector is a challenge we just mentioned. So can you speak to some of the challenges that you have faced in this field and how you and your team overcome them?
So at the beginning, when we started, we didn't have much resources, that means money. And we're fortunate that we came across foundations in the respective field of diseases. For example, the Michael Fox Foundation in Parkinson's disease, the Rett Foundation in Parkinson, and the Rett Foundation in Rett syndrome, and the Fragile X Foundation for Fragile X. And they were very supportive in providing us their access to their experts, and we just sent them over our molecule and they tested it in the respective animal model of the disease, and they called us and said, we have wonderful results with your drug, and we were very excited about it. And from there on, the support continued. Both the Rett Foundation funded also a clinical study after the preclinical confirmation, and the Michael Fox Foundation did the same, which we're very thankful for both.
So let's really leverage the outside resource at the lower cost, but still make the progress.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So as we know, the Anavex has a focus on the precision medicine. So can you explain what that means and how it relates to the company's pipeline and approach to developing new treatments?
Yep. So the different definitions for precision medicine, the way we look at it, it's like the definition of finding a biomarker which correlates with the disease reduction or with a patient benefit. And this biomarkers is something which we can follow with our drug. And that's what we found. So we can identify patients which are responding even better than the overall population. So I want to point out the drug has worked for all patients, irrespective of their genetic background. But for some patients, the effect was even slightly better. And that also confirmed the mechanism, but also shows that we have the ability to provide a drug for some patients. And the good news is that actually it's the majority of 80% who have the wild type gene, for example, of the sigma-1 receptor, which benefits just better with our drug.
That's amazing. So where do you see the future of the biopharmaceutical industry, especially in the field of CNAs?
So I think the direction is following what I see, and I've witnessed it, the oncology space, where the transition was from moving from a unilateral risk gene view to actually the entire spectrum of all genes. And as a matter of fact, we included in all our clinical trials for that, the entire genome, whole genome exome analysis. So we're not looking only at certain risk genes in our trials, but we're looking at the entire gene of a patient, both in the active arm as well as in the placebo arm.
Okay, that's really wonderful. So next, I would like to invite you to share the details of the pipeline under the development and also your future strategy.
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Let me share with you Anavex Life Sciences in our presentation. So we are New York based in the US, and we're focusing and are dedicated to discovery and development late-stage drugs for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and other neurological disorders, rare diseases like, among others, Rett syndrome, and also Fragile X and autism spectrum disorder. So we're aiming to bring with our company's treatments coming to market for benefiting of patients across the globe. We have 37 people in total, and we are listed on Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Our precision medicine allows for the identification of biomarkers, which is very rare and hard to find in CNS, because we're working with the body-own defense mechanism by activating a protein called sigma-1 receptor to restore homeostasis or cellular balance. And this is done also in the body himself, but when the body is depleted by these activators because of aging or cellular chronic stress, which is correlated with Alzheimer and Parkinson, for example, we're able to give this activation of the body-own defense mechanism from the outside in form of our small molecule Anavex 273, which is once daily orally available therapeutic. And that results in a beneficial therapeutic effect for patients. We demonstrated this in a biomarker analysis of expression level of sigma-1 mRNA. And that's just to show that the correlation was very productive. Patients who benefited from the drug also had as a consequence a higher level of sigma-1 expression in their blood. And that was confirmed for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and Rett syndrome. And as a reminder, studies with involvement of a biomarker have just a higher chance of success. And we do have that biomarker, which increases the success of our studies. And I can proudly say that so far, all our clinical studies were successes. In terms of the next stages of data readout, we're expecting the full data of the phase 2/3 Alzheimer's study, which was announced in a top-line data late last year. And we're expecting also the readout of a Rett syndrome study called Rett syndrome study excellence, Rett syndrome study in pediatric patients with that disease called Rett syndrome, which is a horrible disease, by the way. And we are starting also several studies given the very strong preclinical data and the clinical data supporting this pivotal study in Parkinson's disease, as well as in Fragile X, and in another rare diseases, which we have not yet announced the indication, but which is a rare disease in CNS. And we're expecting also several more publications this year related to Anavex 273, and as well as Anavex 371 and Rett syndrome burden of illness study. Last but not least, I also like to mention, we are starting also a study in our second compound in the pipeline, Anavex 371 in schizophrenia, also a huge unmet need. And our compounds have now really been able to drive the biggest unmet need, which is Alzheimer, Parkinson, and other neurological disorders. And as a reminder, we've completed a phase 3 study in Alzheimer's disease, which will be now announced full data accordingly. And we also are planning to test Anavex 371 in a clinical study in Alzheimer's disease. In Parkinson's disease, we have successfully completed a phase 2 study in Parkinson's disease dementia, and we're planning now a phase 3 study, pivotal study, as well as a PET study, which is supported by Michael Fox Foundation, and a pivotal study in Parkinson's disease dementia. And in Rett syndrome, which is a horrible disease where patients are genetically predisposed by birth, and this is a horrible disease which males die right away, but females, girls barely make it, but with very high level of impairment. They cannot speak, they cannot talk, they cannot walk, and they're very much impaired. And we had 2 successful studies, one a phase 2 and in the US, and one international study, phase 3 in adult studies, in adult patients with Rett syndrome. And we are about to read out in the next few months a study called Excellence Study, a phase 3 in pediatric patients, so children with this horrible disease. And we're very excited about this study as well. So this is now the full pipeline. As you can see, it's very much geared towards late stage and ready to market. And we're also starting to look into dialogue with companies around the world for areas, geographic areas, where we will be at a disadvantage to market the drug ourselves, for example, in Asia. I'd like to quickly go through the study of the Alzheimer study designs, which is a very important study. It's a large study of 509 patients in early Alzheimer disease, randomized into 3 arms, placebo and 2 active arms, and pre-specified for genomic precision medicine, and covering the well-accepted co-primary endpoints of cognition and function, respectively by ADAS-Cog and ADCS-ADL. We're expecting, as I mentioned, additional data analysis, among them the biomarkers and, very importantly, MRI data, which is upcoming in the next few months. So the primary endpoints was a co-primary endpoints of ADCS-ADL, ADL, and ADAS-Cog, and both co-primary endpoints were met by using the odds ratio, which is the net improvement from baseline for the patients in the study over placebo. So a very promising outcome. In the secondary endpoint, we were also successful in measuring CDR Sum of Boxes, where our drug blarcamesine, which is Anavex 273, successfully improved over the period of 48 weeks. And the measure is actually quite intriguing because it is stronger, the signal, than an antibody which was recently approved by the FDA called lecanemab or Leqembi by Eisai, Biogen, and we were able to show a similar effect much earlier, which is 24 weeks earlier, which is half a year earlier than lecanemab, and also with the additional advantage without adverse events like ARIA, and without the problem of a not easy to administer injectable drug, which we don't have, because our drug is a simple orally once daily tablet, which you take once daily before going to bed. And when you look at the size of the market of these indications we cover, you can see these are very large markets. In Asia alone, it's 23 million in Alzheimer's disease, in Parkinson's disease, we're talking about 3 million, schizophrenia, 6 million. And when you look at the trajectory of the growth of these indications, it's exponentially almost growing in all regions, especially in Asia. So there's a huge unmet need over the forthcoming years to find a treatment to address these very complex diseases of dementia and CNS diseases in general. We also have a very strong patent protection, including patents in Asia and Japan, for example, up to 2039 across the globe. And one important factor, because our drug works in different indication spaces, we separated the formulation of Alzheimer and Parkinson into an orally once daily tablet formulation and the oral liquid formulation for the Rett syndrome, Fragile X, and other rare diseases indications for patients who cannot swallow easily the drug. That also allows for a separation of the marketing activities and also separation of the pricing. Last but not least, we are well funded. We have enough cash for the next 4 years, and we continue to be supported by foundations like the Michael Fox Foundation and the International Rett Foundation, and also by the Australian government. That allows us to keep our cash utilization rate lower than maybe other companies. And again, we're very thankful for the support from the respective foundations, which are grants, and there are no rights, which we are giving up for that. We also have a strong team, includes team members from the FDA, as well as the key opinion community with the respective indications like Rett syndrome and Fragile X syndrome, as well as big pharma. But also we have a very strong scientific advisory board, which is basically helping in designing trials and executing trials in the respective fields of our indications, which, as I mentioned, is very broad. Overall, we demonstrated that we're very well positioned to move into market opportunities and to reach market penetration going forward with this expensive precision medicine platform, and allowing to enter the market with this unmet need by showing that we have an improved chance of success with the precision medicine approach. We have several differentiated products and therapeutics for the challenging CNS indications with unmet need. And we have achieved already several successful clinical milestones. And again, all studies we have done were successful. And we're positioned for the future because of strong IP, which we have up to 2039. And we have sufficient cash runway to execute on our marketing goals as well as development goals going forward. And again, the support from the respective foundations is very helpful for that. With that, I'd like to thank for the opportunity to present to you. Then you can reach out to us and look up our website, www.anavex.com, for even further information.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for such a great presentation. Also very excited for this very challenging sector, CNS, and you have been making such a great progress, and we are really looking forward to see the drug will benefit for the patient around the world soon. So we collect the questions from the audience in advance. And so we would like to take this chance to get your answer directly. There's a first question I would like to present to you is about the technology platform is based on the premise that activation of the sigma-1 receptors can have the beneficial effects on the multiple pathway involved in the disease pathology. So can you discuss how this approach differs from the traditional drug development strategy and how it may offer advantage in terms of efficacy and safety?
Many drugs in the past are targeting downstream receptors, which are basically limited to certain pathways, downstream pathways. The sigma-1 receptor is very upstream. So we're basically addressing especially for complex diseases, seems to be much more appropriate to address things which are more broadly being addressed by the body itself. So two factors have the advantage of it's the body who is responding to this pathology, not a selected downstream target, which might be limited in itself and might be also even not being well understood, but more let the body decide what to block, what to activate in order to restore functionality, which led to the improvement of the patient, as we can see in dementia, reduction of dementia, and in Parkinson, improvement in motor scores, and in Rett syndrome, both. So that's really probably the best way to compare that. And if you look for a comparison in another indication group, it's a little bit the analogy of oncology, where previously all drugs were blocking or trying to block cancer, and the most successful drugs in cancer are now compounds which activate the body-own immune system. So it's a bit the analogy of helping the body to help himself in CNS.
So do you mind to provide some background how this technology was developed from discover and to now is more like a mature, they also have the concept approved already, right?
Yeah, it's really intriguing that this was developed in the early days of the company foundation around that time. And we have now seen a lot of other work in this area, in this field of sigma-1 receptor. And every other week, there's a new publication confirming that all these sigma-1 activations are really beneficial and can be better explained why they work, because it's really hard to explain often, because it's a body-owned defense mechanism which goes to many pathways. But the best way to describe it is that we are really showing the ability to reduce neurodegeneration by showing with clinically validated endpoints like cognition and function, ADAS-Cog and ADL, improvement of patients from baseline. And in neurodevelopmental disorders, we see a restoration of this impairment. So it also works for neurodevelopmental disorders like Rett syndrome and Fragile X.
Okay, that's thanks for sharing that background. And so we also see you have a lot of the partnership with the institution. Actually, you mentioned this several times with the foundation support. So could you like elaborate how this collaboration and also how do you form such a collaboration? If because there's so many organizations or the foundation can work with. So how do you structure that? Their collaboration to make it more efficiency, and to make it work so faster.
Yep. So we were really lucky that we found the scientific rationale intriguing enough for example, Michael Fox Foundation to test our compound in an animal model first for Parkinson's disease, and which ended up very successful and then led to the advancing into clinical trials, which also was successful. And the same happened for the Rett Syndrome Foundation, which accepted our drug and tested it in our drug in their animal model of Rett syndrome. And the same with Fragile X. And we're now starting a Fragile X program in the clinic. So it's really like trust and giving the rationale and explaining the rationale based on the science we know. But ultimately, it's really a question of trust and conviction that these people were thinking of this Anavex compound could really deliver, and they were right in their assessment that this could deliver.
Thanks. So for your leading candidate, Anavex 273 has shown very promising results in clinical trials. So what do these results mean for the patients and the potential treatment of the Alzheimer disease?
Yeah, so we've seen in the last study and also in the previous one, which we finished, that patients actually had a net improvement from baseline after 48 weeks. So patients who got the drug and had already developed significant Alzheimer's disease, they actually reversed their cognitive impairment and their activities of daily living. So that's fundamentally a difference from a slowing of the decline. And we're very excited about that, because it shows really that there is a chance for patients with a existing disease pathology to actually potentially show a change of course of this pathology.
What are the criteria for select the patients?
The patient has to be confirmed Alzheimer's pathology by the assessment of the physician. And for Parkinson, it has to be a confirmed pathology in Parkinson or Parkinson dementia, or in Rett syndrome, there's a genetic mutation which needs to be confirming that the patient has Rett syndrome. So it's a very clear confirmation of the disease before starting the trial and being enrolled in the trial.
So what's the, based on these the criteria for the patients, what are the potential market size? I think you mentioned about I remember 67 million patients. Do you think that will be the target patients, or?
These are just the number of patients in our indication group. So if we expand to other indication, it could be even larger. But this is the potential addressable market, if you like, for the indications which we're covering today.
So what's your plan to capture?
A very large number.
Right. So what is your plan to capture the market share? Or maybe let's say, what's your plan for the commercialization and the access to the patients around the world?
Yep. So we have a plan to market the rare disease ourselves, which is possible, and it's been done also by other companies before us. But for the large indications, we definitely have to co-partner with the larger pharma companies and in the regions of the world. That includes, of course, Asia as well.
So you're try to not to sell to the bigger pharma, but instead you wanted to be the commercialization stage biopharma company.
We have to be realistic, but we have different scenarios. Depends on how the data comes out, also different indications. We're talking not just about one indication. So it's differentiated between the rare disease indication and the Alzheimer and Parkinson and other indications, or schizophrenia. So we have to differentiate that. But in general, we like to retain as much upside as possible for the shareholders, but also we have to be realistic, and we might need to partner more depending on the regions which we cannot cover ourselves.
So like 273, how do you see the different from other treatment currently available for PDD?
I would say in PDD, Parkinson's dementia, there are not many drugs approved so far as far as I understand. We have not really any drug approved for this. So there's an unmet need, very large one. For Parkinson, there is ongoing treatments which are only symptomatic but not disease modifying. We demonstrated with our drug that we can demonstrate disease modification. And in Alzheimer, there is an approval recently of an antibody, lecanemab, and that has been actually very positive for us because we are targeting a neurodegeneration part of the pathology, and it could be for that reason very synergistic with our drug. So the drug could be lecanemab, could be very synergistic with Anavex 273 or blarcamesine.
So do you think you will be the complementary to them, or you will be the first line?
I think it could be complementary. I don't think that first line is needed as such a big indication. The advantage we have, we are a simple small molecule once orally daily, and lecanemab needs to be given as an injection every 2 weeks over many hours, and that might be more challenging and needs to be also observed with PET scans, which are not many around and worldwide, and we don't need all of that. So, but I think that could be very synergistic.
Thank you. And so you mentioned during your presentation, you mentioned of how the biomarkers increase their efficacy. So what is the plan for development of the Anavex 273 specific biomarkers and 371?
Yep. So 371 will now first start in schizophrenia, and we'll see the data when the data comes out. So it's too early to tell. But the 273, definitely blarcamesine, has shown clear evidence of a biomarker response based on sigma-1 level, and we will monitor that. Right now, we see that all patients benefit, and that's basically a very good scenario. But we also have seen that some patients with a wild-type sigma-1 gene, which is the majority of the patients, by the way, just a tiny little bit better. So right now, we are observing that how this would affect our market strategy. But right now we could go in two ways. One is all patients get the drug, or we focus or separate the pricing for some patients who are responding better.
Okay, I want to switch the gear to the Rett syndrome. I think that's quite amazing to see we are going to have such a treatment for this horrible disease, especially for the babies. So you already conducted two trials in the adult females, and one trial for the children aged 5 to 18 is ongoing. And so since Rett syndrome is a disease that starts from 6 months of age, and the most pronounced symptoms occurred during 12 to 18 months of age. So do you expect to see more benefit for the babies, for the young? Yeah.
For the clinical trial, you need to do in a study where you have a homogeneous level of, call it, behavior, and 5 years and older seems to be the case. If you go to younger patients in a clinical trials, there's too much variability in the patient's behavior, which makes it hard to do a clinical trial. It's not because you don't want to treat patients earlier. But we have seen that in adult studies, usually developmental disorders, not Anavex specifically, don't respond that well unless you go to younger patients. So there is a likely propensity that younger patients, the earlier you treat, you could have a better result. So that could be the case.
So for what do you see for the future? How will you run this clinical trial? How will you set up the criteria, select the patients?
As I said, the key is that we have to have a homogeneous patient group, which have a certain level of pathology or impairment, and then it's a confirmed level of pathology by a genetic test, which developmental disorders have. And in case of Rett syndrome, there's a mutation of one gene called MSQ2, and every patient needs to demonstrate and has confirmed mutation of this gene. And then you are eligible to join the trial.
Okay. So let's say it's much more challenging than for the adults for the trial, right? Yeah. So what's the this is the question, what's the difference MOA between 273 and 371?
So the mechanism of action is relatively similar, with exception that both are completely different drugs, and the Anavex 371 targets also M1 agonists receptors, and Anavex 273 is targeting, in addition to the sigma-1, also several muscarinic receptors, but not the M1 as strongly. So there's a bit like shades of variations of two completely different molecules with also different sigma-1 activity or affinity. And so every drug has its own, scope, and but the mechanism is relatively similar, but in a way differentiated again. And we'll see which one is stronger in the respective field. We believe that 371 will be very strong in schizophrenia, given that M1 activity is involved. And so far, we have not have clinical data in Alzheimer or Parkinson for Anavex 371, so we don't know yet how this would compare to 273. But preclinically, they're very similar.
Okay, thank you. So I would take a last question, since I know you have a hard stop here. And what's your ideal partner of like Asia or especially China?
I think that it would be really good to have a partner which is able to have a history of marketing novel drugs, novel therapeutics, and has the manpower and the strength to reach indications which are as large as Alzheimer and Parkinson, which are extremely high number of patients in the Asian market.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your great sharing and about your personal journey, and also the success progress with the Anavex. And we are really looking forward to see the drug to be beneficial for the patients around the world.
Looking forward as well.
Thank you. So thanks everyone joining us today. And if you have any question, so you can email Chris and his team, or you can reach out to us. So we will put you in contact. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.